بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Welcome to episode 30 of the series The Authentic Statements of the Companions رضي الله عنهم. In this episode we'll take a story that was narrated by one of the tabi'een, and it involves Abu Huraira رضي الله عنه, one of the companions who narrated a lot of hadith from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this tabi'i says I entered Medina. He came to Medina, and he saw that there's a man and the people were gathered around him. So he asked, who's this? They said, it's Abu Huraira radiallahu anhu. So he said, I came close to him and I sat in front of him, and Abu Huraira was talking to the people. He was teaching the people. So then when he was done, when he stopped and he was done, it was quiet for a while. Then this tabi'i said, I ask you, to relate to us, to share with me a hadith that you heard from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that you have learned from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So Abu Huraira said, I shall do that. I will tell you a hadith that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam told me and that I learned from him. And then Abu Huraira, and this is the part that really I want to focus on for this episode. Then Abu Huraira fainted. He's about to start. He said, I'm going to tell you a hadith that I learned from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Then before he even started to relate this hadith, he fainted. Abu Huraira fainted for a while. And he was, unconscious for a while. Then he regained consciousness. And then he said, repeat it again, I'm going to tell you a hadith that I heard from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then he fainted again. Before he started to narrate the hadith, this is how serious and severe it was to them, to the companions, relating from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because it's not something to be taken lightly. This is something severe. This is serious. This is the matter of our deen. This is something that is crucial and critical. You can't just narrate it left and right. You can't just mention adding stuff, adding words, taking out words, changing the meaning of it. You have to be very precise, and the companions were very precise with that. And this shows us that even though Abu Huraira narrated so many hadith from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it was something that was done very carefully and cautiously, something that the companions mastered. Otherwise, they would be so afraid to even relate to anything from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam because of how serious of a matter it is. Then after he regained consciousness, Abu Huraira radiallahu anhu said, I'm going to tell you a hadith that I heard from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then before he started to relate it, he again fainted again. And then he was unconscious for a while. And then he regained consciousness. And then he wiped his face, wiped, the sweat off of his face. And he repeated again, I'm going to tell you a hadith that I heard from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then he fainted again, a third time, fainting 3 times before he started to actually relate this hadith from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then he regained consciousness, and when he fainted, he fainted to the point that man said, I have to support him. He fainted forward, and I had to support him and wait a long while. And then he regained consciousness. And then when he regained consciousness after the 3rd time, he said, the Prophet ﷺ said, and he narrated the hadith in which the Prophet ﷺ tells us the first 3 people who will be brought to account in front of Allah on the Day of Judgment. The first 3 people that will enter hellfire. And the qari, the person who recites the Quran, the martyr, and the generous person. And for those of you who don't know that story, we won't go into it in this episode, but do go back and read up on this hadith, which is authentic, in which the Prophet ﷺ tells us who are the first 3 people who are brought to account and who will enter hellfire on the Day of Judgment. And this story shows us, again, not only how the companions didn't take lightly relating a hadith from the Prophet ﷺ, as to how some people do the opposite today. Not only are they so reckless with it, but also how some people don't even verify authenticity when attributing things to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. They attribute things that are fabricated or very weak, that the Prophet ﷺ never said or did, yet they're relating it, attributing to the Prophet ﷺ without verifying. And we know the severe warning that the Prophet ﷺ gave about attributing things to him that he never said. We also see because this hadith pertains to sincerity, these people who seem to be doing great deeds, you'd imagine they'd be among the highest level of people in Jannah, with the prophets and messengers and companions and righteous people. These people, you'd imagine that they're among the best of people if their intention was sincere, but because their intentions weren't sincere, they're the first people who will enter hellfire on the Day of Judgment. So it shows us the severity of a corrupt intention and not having the right intention, not being sincere and doing things truly for the sake of Allah alone. And that if Abu Huraira radiallahu anhu was fainting because of the severity of that, imagine that, because of the seriousness of this matter, seriousness of the situation on the Day of Judgment, just all of us thinking about that and being mindful of that on that day we will stand in front of Allah, we will be brought to account for all of our deeds, the big and the small, the good and the bad, the private and the public, should bring to our hearts a certain level of fear and khashya and Abu Huraira fainted 3 times because of that, and he was who he was, and yet he fainted 3 times when he was just thinking about this hadith before he even starts to narrate it. Even this should get us to think about our sincerity and why what intention we have, which only we know and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows. It's something between us and Allah, something in our hearts that no one else can see. No one knows why we do the good deeds that we do except Allah. So we need to make sure we purify our intentions, because if not, the punishment is very serious and severe on the Day of Judgment for doing things with the wrong intentions, for not being sincere. It's not just about doing good deeds, it's also about doing good deeds with the right intention, with a sincere intention for the sake of Allah alone. And it shows us Abu Huraira how seriously he viewed this. How seriously he viewed this. He didn't feel safe for himself. Oh, I'm a companion of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, I'm relating so many hadith, I'm teaching people so much good. No, he feared for himself. To the point that he fainted 3 times before even relating this story to everyone else. And yet, a lot of times we just hear the story, we brush it off, or we move on, or it goes one ear out the other, or even if we're shaken by it, realize the severity of it, the importance of making sure that we're sincere, we have the right intention when we do things, but at the same time, the impact isn't that strong. Abu Huraira fainted 3 times from this. And this is what I want to take from this episode today. Barakallahu fikum, jazakumullahu khaira, wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.